Welcome back. So again, the question was, when an individual or couple have encountered financial difficulties, generally it was because they violated one or more of God's financial principles, perhaps unknowingly. Can you think of any? Provide a reference to Scripture. Here's my suggested solutions. Number one, having no savings for unexpected expenditures. Proverbs 21:20 is clear. The wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. Unfortunately, today most people fall into the foolish category as they spend all of their regular income. That is, they live paycheck to paycheck, and they have no savings, and they're not saving for future needs. Another one is taking on too much debt. Proverbs 22:7 warns that when you take on debt, you may become a servant to the lender. And of course, we're here to serve God, not a lender. Number three, often people can buy things they really do not need because of covetousness, which Exodus 20:17 warns against, or the lack of contentment. Remember in Hebrews 13:5, it says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you and never will I forsake you. And number four, giving God the leftovers instead of the first fruits. In Proverbs 3:9 and 10 it says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled overflowing and your vats will brim over with new wine. It's key that we make giving to God's work a priority. If we don't, if we decide we're going to buy this and buy that and take on debt, often God ends up with the leftovers, which is usually small. Number five, co-signing on a loan for which the Bible uses the term striking hands in pledge. To strike hands in pledge meant striking hands, shaking hands, pledging, confirming that you're responsible for someone else's debt. That's co-signing. And the Bible warns against that and says if you do co-sign, your very bed may be taken out from under you. You may lose something very important, perhaps your home, perhaps part of your retirement fund, something of importance. By the way, stats show that most of the time when people co-sign on a loan, it's usually the co-signer that ends up paying the debt. And on top of that, usually the relationship is soured. I'll speak more about that later. Number six, getting involved in an investment that they did not understand. Proverbs 19:2 says, it is not good to have zeal without knowledge, nor to be hasty and miss the way. Or getting involved in an investment that's not biblically diversified. And Ecclesiastes 11:1 and 2 admonishes us to, generally speaking, there may be exceptions, but generally speaking, allocate our portfolio in a way that is diversified in accordance with biblical principles, and specifically Ecclesiastes 11:1 and 2. Number seven, not having a budget. In Luke 14:28 to 30, Christ admonished us to plan ahead. And the most practical tool to use in planning is develop and implement a budget or a spending plan. And if people don't have a budget or a spending plan of some kind, they're likely going to make financial decisions based upon gut feel or personal desires and not the financial facts of their circumstances. Speaking of financial facts, the third step in becoming debt-free that I have found is given in Proverbs 27:23, where it says, be sure you know the condition of your flocks, give careful attention to your herds. At the time this was written, most people were farmers. So you may not be a farmer, but the practical application in that day was know where you're at financially. And we need to know where we're at financially. We need to know what our financial facts are. Decisions based on gut feel or personal desire are very, very dangerous, and especially if one spouse is doing that and another spouse is doing that, and if they're not communicating, the probabilities are, I've seen, no matter how high the income is, there can be a tendency to spend more than one makes and accumulate debt. Number four, develop and implement a cash flow plan or budget. A properly implemented budget will enable you to spend less than your income each month, which will generate a surplus which will allow you to pay down debt and save for future needs. There's actually about 40 references in the Bible to planning, and generally they admonish us to plan ahead. Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to advantage. And I love Proverbs 16:3, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. So I think it's key to make prayer the foundation of your planning meetings, because as you pray, you need to ask God to reveal to your heart and mind His plan as to how you can reduce your debt and how you can manage money God's way. Number five, ask God to enable you to be content with His provision. Contentment is key. So often people get into financial trouble because they're not content with God's provision for their life. And it's just key. It can be things like selfishness, covetousness, or greed. These are worldly mindsets or attitudes. And the solution to them is contentment. In Philippians 4:11-13, Paul said, "For I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." I'd like you to meditate on Philippians 4:11-13 for a few minutes. I want you to stop the video, meditate on it, read over it carefully. And here's the question. What was Paul's secret to learning contentment? Again, what was Paul's secret to learning contentment? The video will stop. Discuss this if you're in a group. Write down your answer, and then click on the next video for my suggested solution.